Hi guys, welcome back to Ancient Egypt. We are looking at our Lesson 3 video notes today, and we're going to be looking at Egypt's empire. Now remember, an empire is many lands under just one ruler. And today's lesson matters because the leaders during this golden age of Egypt expanded the empire through trade. And although Egypt later did decline, meaning it went downhill, it greatly influenced other civilizations. Remember that when we last left off, we had just finished up discussing the Old Kingdom, or the first period of time during which Egypt was powerful. And it stretched all the way from our delta, all the way down to that first cataract. Remember that rapid waterfall, the cataract. And it was known for its monuments like the Sphinx that we see here and the pyramids. Now, a lot of people think pyramids were built all through Egyptian history, but really they were only built during the Old Kingdom because the pharaohs and other people figured out pretty fast that if you bury your pharaohs in pyramids and you put all their grave goods in there and then you don't protect them, well, then they're gonna get robbed. So today we're going to talk about two more periods of time, the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Remember, the Middle Kingdom we're going to see Egypt growing and growing and continuing to expand, as well as the New Kingdom. And we're going to grow from that small river valley civilization to a huge nation with a strong army, trade networks, and larger borders. We have two kind of sayings today that really help us tie today's lesson together. We have the saying, united we stand and divided we fall. So think about where you might have heard that before. And the second one is, our enemies are always watching. See how these statements will be applied to ancient Egypt as we go forward. And also don't forget our third statement. Never leave your empire to your son. Never trust your empire with your son. And you'll see why that might be a bad idea. Now let's talk about the Middle Kingdom. Okay, so I want you to circle on your maps from about 2575 to 1630 BC, or before Christ. And we see that the Lower Kingdom is this orange here. The Middle Kingdom, we spread out just a little bit more, kind of widening along the delta and then down into the Second Cataract. So circa, or right around 2050 BC, a pharaoh named Menhotep II united Egypt and started a powerful rule. After Mini's dynasty had become weakened, there was a period of chaos. So Menhotep started the Middle Kingdom, and this was a period of order and stability that lasted until about 1750 BC. So if we do our math, that is, and I want you to write this on the side, 300 years. 300 years. And it's known for its trade, roads, and the economy was thriving. That means that Egypt was becoming rich and wealthy, and they made lots of money. And pharaohs no longer built pyramids. Put a star by that. Okay? So instead, we start to see the development of something called the Valley of the Kings, which is where we later find King Tut. And so it's this valley out in the desert outside of where the pyramids were built. And so it's a couple miles out in the desert, and the tombs are built into the sides of the rocks. So it's a pretty cool way to make sure that those pharaohs were protected. Think about when we watched our U versus Wild video in class, how hard it was to kind of get into these little canyon areas and how easy it was to fall and hurt yourself. So this is a pretty smart idea to protect those pharaohs. Now, our Middle Kingdom does start to go down. The pharaohs just couldn't keep the kingdom together. And this led to an invasion from a group from Southwest Asia, or we can put Mesopotamia, called the Hyksos. And they had those chariots that we talked about when we looked at the Akkadians and some of the other groups from Mesopotamia. So they rode in chariots and fought with sturdy weapons. So they were kind of a very strong military force. So we see a chariot here, okay? But around 1550 BC, an Egyptian prince called Ahmose formed an army and drove the Hyksos from Egypt. And that's going to start So for most of this video, we're going to talk about the last period of time in which Egypt was powerful, the New Kingdom. So this rang from about 1550 to 1070 BC. Now remember, BC, bigger, before, and then when we have two dates that are on the same side, we subtract. So up here, I want you to tell me how many years passed between these two periods of time when the New Kingdom rather was powerful. So this began by Pharaoh Ahmose, and it was the period in which Egypt reached the height of its power and glory. Down here, I want you to write this was its golden age. That phrase is super important. Circle this phrase. That means that that's the time where it's shining the brightest. And it created a strong military empire and expanded trade. And a lot of that is due to two strong leaders that we see in the New Kingdom. Our first one is Queen Hatshepsut. Yes, I said queen. We have a female pharaoh. Okay, and in fact, she is Egypt's first female pharaoh. She worked to increase Egyptian trade, but there's much more to her story than that, and we're going to look at her kind of more in depth in class. And trade routes were routes followed by merchants. Now, she ruled for almost 50 years, and during her rule, there's a bust of her. She often presented herself as a male with the fake beard to kind of make sure that people took her really seriously, just like they would any other pharaoh. And in addition to trade, she built some beautiful temples. So this is what we call her funerary temple or her mortuary temple. It's a temple for when she dies. It would be her offering to the gods. So you can still go visit this today, and you can see the big ramp right here. And there would have been, oh, there's the ramp, and there would have been, this would have been ceilinged over, and then it's carved into the side of this cliff. Okay, so huge monument here that she was responsible for creating. The second pharaoh we're going to look at is Ramses the Great. Sometimes we see him being listed as Ramses the Second. Okay, so right in that second. He was a great warrior and builder, and so he built all sorts of monuments like Hatshepsut, such as temples. And he fought against the Hittites, a group from Asia Minor, and eventually became allies with them. So here's some of his statues. You can see him right here, okay? So again, he's got that false beard that a pharaoh would have worn. So the statue was one he commemorated, but here's also him kind of memorializing or showing how he defeated other groups. And here is one of the temples he built. You might have noticed this was the same temple. This is the same temple that was in our opening act. So he really wanted to make sure he left a strong legacy. And we're going to talk more about him as well. But he was a great military strategist. He fought against groups like the Hittites, a group from Asia Minor or Mesopotamia, and eventually became allies with them. He convinced them that it was much better to trade and have a strong relationship where they worked together than to be separate and for him to take them over. So both of these pharaohs, Hatshepsut and Ramses, we're going to talk about more in class and get kind of a deeper knowledge. So that's now 3 pharaohs we've talked about in Egypt. We've talked about Menes, we've talked about Hatshepsut, and Ramses the Great. All 3 of these are going to be really important people for you to know. So Egypt, over its period of many thousands of years, survived many invasions from outside areas, and we're going to talk about one of the groups in our next video notes that did invade Egypt, but eventually it lost its power forever to other groups such as the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. And the Romans are what we see here. This is the largest empire in the ancient world, so they're up against some pretty significant threats. So in the kind of vein of thinking about Egypt surviving these invasions, I want you to think about 2 phrases that I've said quite a lot. I want you to think about the phrase, united we stand, divided we fall, and your enemies are always watching. You could also throw in there, never trust your son with your empire. How do these apply to the rulers of ancient Egypt and how they gained power and lost it? I should see 2 to 3 sentences at the very least, and if you have questions, ask them. Remember that you will lose points if you do not do your hot question.
We're now ready.
Okay, guys, so once again, we have a pun for you here. And I want you to make sure you write this down. All you need to do is write down the answer. You don't have to write down the entire joke. It's kind of long. So, ladies, what is a pharaoh's favorite restaurant?
Pizza Tut.
Ah, Pizza Tut, because like King Tut, like, yeah. All right, guys, I love you. Have a great day. Make sure you have written down all that good stuff, and I can't wait to see you in class. Remember, these are due Wednesday. Say bye, ladies.
Bye.